So thanks for coming. I was hoping that my title might lure a few non-CF types along, and it looks like it might have worked. Good. I hope I'm not going to scare you off of CF if you're quite new to CF. It would be helpful for me with the stuff I'm going to show you to know who is here who has never done any canopy formation before. Oh, excellent. Okay, great. So for some of you in the room might not know me, I'm Mary and I'm quite heavily involved in CF. I'm a coach and an organiser and a competitor in the UK, and I'm part of a European Canopy Formation team as well, who do a lot of organising across Europe. And as somebody who's heavily involved with CF, I'm well aware that the discipline comes with quite a reputation, as summarised in my title. So when I was asked if I wanted to come and give a seminar, I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to kind of look behind that reputation and maybe unpick some of the myths around the discipline and sort of give a bit of a realistic picture of what CF is about. Hopefully without scaring people who haven't ever done it before off too much. So to do that, to sort of look behind that reputation, I'm going to share a couple of facts with you. I'm going to tell you some stories, and I'm going to share some video with you. And I feel I have to make a bit of a disclaimer here that some of the video definitely isn't for the faint-hearted. It's the kind of video that we generally don't put out in the public as CF jumpers because it just feeds into this kind of reputation. But it seems appropriate that I share some with you here. So you might want to avert your eyes at some points. And also I am aiming to cover quite a lot and to go through it quite quickly so that we have a bit of time at the end for you to ask questions about the stuff I'm going to show you, and maybe if you've got some things that you would like cleared up about CF, we could do that then. There's a few other crew jumpers in the room, so I'm hoping they'll join me. It's always nice to have different crew dogs' voices on these things. And I probably should explain at this point that CF is also known as crEUw, which is an acronym for Canopy Relative Work, and I do tend to slip between the two, so please bear with me. And we tend to sort of collectively refer to ourselves as crew dogs, and that kind of harks back to some of the military associations that is a really important part of the discipline's history, and it also gives a nod towards the kind of camaraderie that the discipline has at the centre of it. So swiftly moving on, while I was thinking about this talk, so I was asked if I would like to give a talk, and I thought, oh, I'll clear up some of these myths, and then I was thinking, what can I cover? What are the things that sort of really people misunderstand about CF? And this randomly came up on my Facebook feed. And I thought, is it truth or is it myth? Not the I love crew bit. 5 minutes in a room with me and you'll know that that's not in dispute at all. But the idea that only in crew is there a formation called the snack. Well, yes, there is in crew. It's one of the block formations from four-way sequential, and it looks like this. So a nice looking formation. I'm assuming people are going to be from all different disciplines here, and so I know that we have a snack in crew, but is anybody involved in a discipline that has a snack as a formation? Okay, right, so probably this is truth. It quite often also surprises people when they find out that we have a dive pool in CF, that we have blocks and randoms, that we're not just madly crashing our canopies as fast as we can into each other and kind of hoping they stick and hoping we don't die in some kind of huge malfunction. And it also often surprises people that we dirt dive. And the reality is, just like in any other discipline, we do dirt dive, and we look blooming ridiculous doing it. In fact, we probably look more ridiculous than any other discipline when we're trying to dirt dive crew. And I think this nice little video of PH36 dirt diving two-way sequential kind of illustrates quite nicely just how bad we do look. This is one of my tamer videos. This was not the video I was saying you might want to avert your eyes from.
Despite it being very much
I also want to show this to the general public.
Yeah, we know we look silly. So the reality of the dirt diving is that when we're dirt diving CF, we just look like we're in some kind of silent disco. Yeah. I thought this photograph actually usefully flags up something else that is perhaps a much more interesting bit of that CF myth. And that's that you have to jump old, scary, scruffy, dangerous looking kit as a crew dog. We have got some toggles sticking out the back here. But other than that, I mean, I've got a bit of a warped view, but it's pretty tidy looking kit here. There's even some colour coordination going on, kind of. So is it a myth or is it reality that you have to jump crappy, scruffy, smelly old kit to be a crew jumper? Well, the truth is you don't need to jump kit that looks like this. Be relieved, with toggles and canopy hanging out. That's actually quite smart for Indrik. Usually he does have more fabric hanging out around here. But the truth is you don't need to jump kit that looks like this. In fact, it seems to be becoming increasingly common for people to jump quite tidy kit. We've got a few current CF jumpers. He jump really tidy looking kit to the point where you might be on the flight line and not even realise it's CF kit. But for those of you who aren't CF jumpers, I think it's useful to explain why we might jump kit that looks like this, or a more extreme case, why we might jump kit that looks like this, why we might end up on the flight line like Molly here, with kit hanging out seemingly all over the place. Because sometimes we do have good reason to look like this as crew jumpers. So firstly, we free pack our canopies. Occasionally, crew jumpers do use bagged canopies. They put them in a D bag. But it's much more common for us to be jumping free packed canopies. So what we have here is canopy hanging out. It's not in a D bag. It's not being contained. And that, for us, that has the advantage of promoting a more reliable on-heading opening and promoting a quicker deployment, inflation, and then controllability of the canopy. So we have quite good reason for jumping free packed canopies. And another reason why we might end up looking like this is sometimes on a crew jump, for a variety of reasons, you might end up swapping canopies around. So you find yourself trying very quickly to free pack an unfamiliar canopy into your container, or maybe a container that you've just managed to cobble together because it just about fits. And then you might end up on the flight line, like Molly here, with bits of fabric hanging out, but you know that the kit's good. You know that it's all configured appropriately. I can see a few faces that I'm really not convincing that this is a good idea.
Are you still alive?
Yes, Martin.
I just comment that it's not done intentionally like this to have it like that. It's better to have the canopy all contained, just like for when you're moving around in the aircraft, it's not going to snag or anything. But on the other hand, if someone ends up doing it like this, it's not really a big problem. So, you know, it's not that that's the intention. It's just that it's not really an issue.
Yeah. Which is what I'm trying to sort of emphasise, is a crew jumper jumping that will know that this isn't an issue. And one nice thing about this photograph is the riser cover's closed, which is something that I've noticed really bothers people on the flight line and in the aircraft. They really want to tell you your riser covers are open. And I thought I'd demonstrate with my kit why we might jump, one of the reasons why we might jump with riser covers open, because we do. We have quite a lot of stuff on our risers that allow us to do CF appropriately. And that can mean on some containers, such as this one, that the riser covers simply won't close and stay closed. But that's actually a good thing for us. In crew, we're generally, most likely to be hopping and popping. We're taking a very short delay and we're pitching within a few seconds. So we don't need riser covers in the way you might for other disciplines. And having them both open, again, it contributes to that on-heading opening. Because if you have a non-simultaneous popping of the riser covers, that is going to skew your canopy deploying. So you'll quite often see crew jumpers actually undoing riser covers once they're in the aircraft, as part of their checks in the aircraft. So in answer to that question, is it a myth or is it truth that you need to jump kit that looks like this? Well, in truth, to do crEUw, you definitely don't have to. You have a choice about it. But if you do CF, you just might find yourself on the flight line looking a little bit like this and being quite happy with that. Because sometimes there is good reason to rock up on the flight line like this if you're doing crEUw. So I'm going to move very quickly on to what is probably the most well-known of absolutely indisputable facts about CF. And we all know it is an absolute fact. And that's that if you do CF, you are going to end up in a wrap or an entanglement. You are going to have to cut away and you are going to have to use a very big knife. Almost immediately on a crEUw jump. We know this, don't we, as crEUw jumpers? This is the way it is, yes, yes. So, okay, is that a myth? Is it really true that it's all reserve rides and big knives? This was, Tash and I were actually out in Estonia last year for the Paris Summer Boogie, for it's big boogie, and there's big way crEUw going on there, and there they like to keep a cutaway tally. So this is a photograph of the corner of the board in the packing shed. And this is in the first few days. But it might surprise you that actually this was across all disciplines. And by the end of the boogie, there'd been around 3,000 jumps. And there'd been a total of 13 cutaways. Does anybody want to have a guess how many of those were crEUw cutaways?
0.
Good guess, good guess. Actually, it's a bit disputable because... because well, even worse than that from a crEUw perspective, most of the cutaways were between the tandems and the wingsuiters. They were dreadful, they were shocking, cutting away all over the place. This Dutch reserve ride was a crEUw jumper. But given what I've just said about free packed canopies, he was jumping a bagged canopy. And his cutaway was because he had a bag lock. He didn't even get to fly a Lightning. He didn't get anywhere near another canopy. So we all dispute this as a crEUw cutaway. Absolutely, definitely wasn't part of our group, jumping a bagged canopy. And looking at this, because what I'm trying to suggest is that perhaps crEUw cutaways aren't as common as you might think. And data from the BPA seems to support this. So in 2015, there was a total of 255 reserve rides reported in the UK. 4 of those involved CF entanglements. 2016, we've got more or less the same figures across the board. This is excluding tandems. 2017, we all know it was a bit of a crappy weather year, slightly less jumps overall. Slightly more reserve rides, 259. crEUw jumpers, we are so consistent.
So is that
4.
So what happens in October? We sit there going, have we had our 4 cutaways yet? No, let's go do that.
Yeah. Only 4, that's it. We have to stop after that. So by the end of January, crEUw's done for the year. But actually, in reality, it's really difficult to talk about this in hard and fast terms, this idea that maybe we don't have as many cutaways in crEUw as you might think, because there's lots of different factors to bear in mind. Primarily, you'd think about the proportion of crEUw jumps in relation to other disciplines. There's far fewer of us, and we tend to do less jumps because each jump takes a bit longer, we're in the air for longer, and because we're a little bit more weather dependent or scuppered by weather conditions that other people can be jumping in. And then there's less obvious issues as well, such as that idea that we're in the air for longer. So we might be under canopy, so at risk of cutting away, for between 10 and 15 minutes every jump. I only do CF at the moment, so I'm not really sure for definite how long other people spend under canopy, but working it out, I'm thinking between 3 and 4 minutes. 2? Oh, okay, so we really are more at risk of cutting away.
End-to-end jump free phase, 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we've walked sort of more or less 5 times or more in our jump of time when we're at risk of cutting away. Pardon? Definitely, Martin, absolutely, yes. Don't tell them that though, they'll all want to be doing crEUw. So based on this kind of information, it seems pretty safe to say that crEUw involves perhaps less cutaways than you might imagine. And there are several things that contribute to that. It makes a bit more sense thinking that we have less cutaways than you might think if you look at what we actually do. So we do quite often have incidents that look scary from the outside, but they actually don't, they get resolved really easily and don't go anywhere near needing a cutaway. So this is Sam and Emily having a bit of a canopy scuffle, or a more technical term would be a canopy collapse, which is where you just knock some air out of a few of the cells and then the canopy performs suboptimally. And as soon as this canopy bounces off, then this one's going to reinflate, and it's kind of boom, it's over and done before you even realise really. And it's the kind of thing that happens very early on in someone's CF jumping. It happens slowly, it happens high up. And you get used to, you get sort of build up that experience of how canopies react and of how you can resolve issues. So with sort of building up that understanding from starting crEUw, it starts to make a bit more sense why there might be less cutaways than you think, because we're not cutting away instantly from things like canopy collapses or wraps. Wraps, which Jason, with his head in someone's canopy, is demonstrating nicely. A wrap is literally when a bit of canopy fabric gets wrapped around a jumper, really. And you'll be happy to know this was resolved easily without a cutaway. Jason literally has just peeled canopy off of his head. Job done. Carry on with the jump. You'd actually be really surprised, if you're not a crEUw jumper, you would be really surprised what you can resolve without a cutaway. I've got a couple of examples, but I was expecting a bigger screen than this. I think you might struggle to see this one. This is a big way meet in Holland, and this is a formation that is about to break down. And what you're going to see is 2 little canopy scuffles where sort of 4 canopies, almost had our total cutaways, 4 canopies all sort of end up scuffling, and there's not a single cutaway. Oh, wrong one. So you see on the right-hand side a bit of a scuffle, and then these 2 canopies fly into each other. You don't quite see this one resolved because they go off screen, but no cutaways. And I've got a bit more of a visible example. This is experienced jumpers building what we call an arrowhead, which is kind of our equivalent of a base for a bigger formation. It's a really difficult thing to do because number 2 and number 3, their canopies are hinged in the corner and they just want to fly around. It gets really messy. Definitely going to be 3 cutaways, without question. And then boom, it's kind of resolved. And they can just come back in and try for some more.
So this is one of the reasons why I think everyone should do CF really early on in their skydiving career, because you learn quite how resilient canopies are. You think to yourself, oh my God, I mean, that was, oh my God, it's funny, but actually they want to fly. They so want to fly, and just incredible resilience in your canopy. And then you have more faith in your canopy, even if it's a patcher, you know, and you need to have a lot of faith in a patcher.
Yeah, absolutely. but I thought I'd give people a rest of banging on why they should all try CF, because I did that last year. Thank you. So yes, things do get resolved. Canopies are resilient. They want to fly. If you get them out of a pickle, they're just going to try and do their job. But, and actually I should add before moving on that the two examples I've just shown you that are slightly more radical, or seem slightly more radical, are among experienced jumpers. This isn't really the kind of thing that is going to happen when somebody starts CF. This is experienced jumpers trying to push their own skills and being quite ambitious in that, the two examples I've just shown you. And sometimes, yes, this does lead to a cutaway or two. And so I'm going to show you 3 examples of cutaways. But and they're different kinds of cutaways for different reasons. But what I think is really interesting across them is how much time is spent trying to resolve the issues. That on none of these 3 examples are you going to see instant cutaways, because building up this kind of experience, crew jumpers tend to, if they've got the altitude, if it seems like there might be a way to resolve something, they tend to try to resolve things. And there's often at least one flying canopy that is sort of looking after everything else. So this is a senior level 4-way team in the UK. Before I show the video, actually, I'll explain, for those of you who don't know how 4-way rotations might work in CF, the idea is the pilot, the one at the top, is going to come off the top and they're going to come back down to the bottom of this formation and make a nice central dock down here on the bottom person as quickly as possible. And as soon as they have docked on the bottom here, then the next person is going to rotate off the top and come and dock on the bottom as quickly as possible. So it's quite hairy and it's fast paced. And I'm just going, I'm going to explain, for people who don't do crEUw, I'm going to explain our retractable bridle system as well, because it will help you understand what I'm going to show you. So on CF, if we had the normal bridle hanging out of the back here with our pilot chute on, it causes all sorts of issues. So we have a retractable bridle system, which I'm hoping I can ask Tash to help me demonstrate. If you could take one end, Tash, and I'll take the other. So we have 3 rings across the top of our canopy. And on deployment, these 3 rings, I remember to get the pilot chute out, these 3 rings pull the bridle tight, which means that the pilot chute sits in the middle ring and it's kept out of trouble. If the bridle is set at just the right length, on full pressurisation, the pilot chute is actually going to come into this ring in the middle and be kind of kept there by the ring. So what happens in this example, thanks Tash, is instead of a central dock, we get a dock from the side at the bottom. Oh, I've done it again. We don't get a central dock at the bottom. We get an offset dock at the bottom, which collapses the canopy, allowing this whole retractable bridle to come up. So here we go. Dock from the side, collapses the canopy. Then their pilot chute ends up in the AB cascades on number 3's canopy. So it actually takes out number 3's canopy. But they're trying to resolve it. When they realise they can't, number 4 cuts away. Number 3 carries on trying to resolve it. Then the other 2 drop number 3 to see if that will make a difference. Number 3 works at that and then cuts away. So my next example is from the Falls from Planes boogie in Paris last year. And these things are different at a boogie as they are for any discipline. So sometimes you get more cutaways, more sort of ambitious stuff goes on at a boogie. And here we've got a diamond formation building. So this person has come in to dock here. but their canopy has gone round and wrapped round the body of the person on the purple canopy. And before I move on to the next slide, just have a look at how nice and stable that diamond is flying. All the canopies are making these nice level rows across. It's flying nicely. But that extra weight on the right-hand side then sends the diamond oscillating. It becomes a little bit unpredictable. You can see that it's tilting over this way. Number 2 and number 3 are starting to bounce around like this. So this person here cuts away because the person on the purple canopy can't get out of that wrap. So the person there cuts away, which then means that the person on the purple canopy can get dropped out of the formation, they can go and find a bit of clean air, and they can then try and get out of that wrap. And in that, they are nicely followed by the camera person. The camera person's making sure they're okay, of course, making sure the kit's okay while they're trying to get out of this. Or maybe they're just taking the opportunity to geek the camera and get some nice shots. So the next example I'm going to show you is, again, it's another boogie incident.
All the way down like that, could you just, I mean, it seemed to be flying.
Yes, it definitely wouldn't be recommended because it would be unpredictable, and the last thing you want is one of those risers coming up into your own lines just as you get too low to do anything about it. But actually on this example I'm going to show you, the person who ends up wrapped in the canopy did fly back with it, but they tucked it all up inside their t-shirt, and again they had the camera person was flying next to them. They actually had 3 jumpers flying around them, making sure that they were okay. And the cutaway was really high. I think the cutaway, so when the person was left with the canopy around them, was probably at about 10,000 feet. And it was an incredibly experienced person. It was Steve Haley, who I think you might know. I think he's one of the, maybe not the world record, but maybe one prior to that. And this is at Skydive Sebastian in Florida. So a cutaway canopy from 10,000 feet was basically going to be lost to sea, or there was a risk of it. So there's various reasons, but and you'll see. So again, this is a dime. Sorry.
So never recommend that you bring a canopy down.
Yeah.
Very much a personal judgment.
Yeah.
I recommend you get rid of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So because you just to make sure there's no chance of re-inflating.
Yeah. So again, this is a diamond building, and you'll see it goes a bit funky this time on the left-hand side, and they try to resolve it on that side and end up dropping the person from the formation, which is fine, and you see the canopies reinflate themselves as they do. But it causes an issue on the other side of the formation. But again, that resolves. It ends up with the canopy getting wrapped around someone's foot. They kick that canopy off and the canopy reinflates, but as you'll see, it ends up with 2 people on this split second bit of bad luck, pure bad luck. So here we go, a bit funky on the left-hand side, but actually the diamond's still flying really nicely. It's still stable. So they got a bit of time to think, what's happening here? So you see here the red and black canopy, straight round. Boom. But again, try to resolve it first. But yeah, it's not going to be resolved. Sebastian, yeah, so cut away. So 3 different examples of cutaways, but as I say, you can see how much time is put into thinking, can we resolve this? Can we get out of it? And that kind of opportunity when things happen seems to largely be behind the fact that we don't have as many cutaways as you might think we would in CF, because things get resolved often very quickly, and if they're not resolved quickly, we often have the time. So, in these examples, you've got a lot of flying canopies. So we have the time to try and deal with things. So the truth is, in answer to that question, is it all cutaways and big knives, is, well, there's some really ambitious stuff goes on in CF. You know, things like this. Again, this is from the Falls from Plane Boogie in Paris. It's really ambitious. And yes, sometimes it does result in a cutaway or two. Sometimes it results in this kind of mess. This is one of my favourite when crew goes wrong kinds of photographs. And this is the kind of thing I was saying at the beginning, that I'm going to show you things that don't often get into the public domain, because this is the kind of thing that stays in people's minds when they think about crew. But here you'll see we have some kind of really tough pilot at the top there who's just holding on to the whole thing, thinking if people have a few seconds more, maybe they can resolve something down below. But while we get ourselves into all sorts of scary looking situations, ones like these that require cutaways are extremely rare. And the jumpers that are involved are likely to have built up the kind of experience that I was saying through those minor canopy scuffles that resolve themselves. So the reality is, on a CF jump, you're far more likely to see stable canopies and smiley faces and just jumpers having a great time. But these kind of pictures don't grab the attention like the wraps one that I've just shown you. They're not the ones that people go, have you seen this? Definitely don't want to try this discipline kind of stuff. So what about the idea that CF always involves big knives? Well, to some extent, yes. It's a requirement for us to have 2 knives. And that's because we just might need them. And if it's a requirement for you to have 2 knives as a safety thing because of what you're doing, you do tend to pay quite a bit of attention to those knives. You want knives that you know are going to work. You want knives that you know exactly where they are, that you can reach them instantly when you need them. So as a group, I think we spend quite a lot of time talking about our knives, and we're in the packing shed and we're swapping knife tips, and every time you see us on the flight line, we're going to have a couple of knives on show because they need to be readily accessible. So on each of my kits, I've got 2 knives that are built in. I have got a hook knife on my mud flaps, and I have got an aircrew knife. And I've got the same on both of these rigs. And if I'm doing the kind of big way stuff that I've shown you some of here, I have another pair of trousers that have a built-in knife here, because I feel that I'm more at risk of maybe needing a knife on those jumps. And the idea with crEUw, this sort of having readily available knives, is that if part of you is wrapped, you have a knife you can reach with either hand. And this can be really important. I actually had incident where I used my aircrew knife on my chest strap. I was in a stack, and with a canopy formation stack, you break it down from the bottom. You drop one person, they go that way. You drop the next person, they go that way. It's very nice, it's very ordered, it's great. I dropped the person below me. Out of my peripheral vision, I saw them go that way. And I looked up and I said, drop me, going right. Person above me dropped me. I didn't realise that that person had come back in underneath me. So I'm feet first into the top of somebody else's canopy. Now with crEUw, if you're going to hit somebody else's canopy, the top of somebody else's canopy, you go into kind of big bouncy castle mode, so that you are spreading your weight across the top of that canopy, you're knocking a bit of air out of it, and then it's just going to drop. No issue. But going feet first into a canopy means you just create a kind of crater in the middle of it, and all the fabric comes up here. And my issue wasn't a bit of fabric. My issue was the retractable bridle system. In making a big crater in the middle of the canopy, Ian's laughing over there, yes, I have actually slid in here like this. So I've ended up with bridle hooked around my chest strap with my knife and my altimeter on it. And because of the retractable bridle system, that collapses the other canopy. So I've got the weight of the canopy and the other jumper hanging off of the 900-pound Dacron on my chest strap. I've tried 3 times to take it off, but we were breaking the formation down because we were quite low, so I didn't have the luxury of time, and my knife was right there on my chest strap, knife out, cut the bridle, incident resolved. The person whose bridle I cut didn't even realise until we landed and I told them and said, "Why did you fly back in underneath me?" Politely, just like that. So that's my story of using a knife. And I've actually got 2 other knife stories here, which I'm going to skip through really quickly. So Martin very nicely gave me permission to use this bit of video. So it's a building of an arrowhead, so a bit like that 3-way that I showed you before in the incident that resolved itself, where we've got a pilot with a helmet cam on, and number 2 on the blue canopy here is already docked on this foot, and number 3 is coming in to dock on this foot. It's a really difficult thing to do, but it goes pretty well. There is a bit of fogging on the lens here. It goes pretty well up to a point. Yeah, there's a bit of fogging on the lens here, but it's such an interesting piece of video that I'm going to show you, despite the fogging on the lens. Going well up till that point. But you can see how Martin's using his foot and his leg and his hands to keep those lines at bay. And I've turned the sound off because it's not very good quality. But if we have the sound on, he doesn't swear at all. It's very calm. Marcus at the bottom shouts up, "We're at 4,500. It's a reasonable height to be under a canopy. And you have to remember, Martin's canopy is flying above this, but he's got canopy wrapped around his head, so he yells to Marcus to cut away, and that means that Martin then is left. I feel really awful talking this through with you sat there, Martin, but this this leaves Martin to be able to try and get this rogue canopy off of his risers, and it's gone round both risers, but he's got time. His canopy's fine, so he gets it off of one riser. I was impressed there was no swearing. Manages to get it off the other riser. It's brilliant. Yeah, and there's this dastardly line left. And you can't get it up over your own canopy, and you can't push it down because it's under a lot of tension and you'd be sliding it over your handles. So what do? You use your knife. And then I would imagine you calmly put your knife away again in its sheath, take a big breath. No.
You didn't make it back to BPA, did you?
No, Langer. Yeah. We tend to do all our big wave stuff at Langer, so a lot of what I'm showing you is at Langer. Okay, so one last quick example of knife usage. This is at Spring Fling 2016, that big crazy boogie out in Florida. And again, this is a canopy has come in and docked on the white canopy. So the bright yellow canopy has come in, docked on next to the yellow canopy, but it's swung round, which has put the pilot of the yellow canopy sort of nose to nose with the pilot of the white canopy, and they're both in the candy stripe canopy. So that's where we are with this. Now, several of you know Jason Hobbs, don't you? Yeah. Okay, you'll notice on a lot of the footage that I'm showing you is Jason, and he ducks out of the back the minute something starts happening.
It's his thing, isn't it?
It is his thing. It is his thing. Yes. Yes. So, a few shots later, person from the yellow canopy has cut away. Jason ducks out the back. Nicholas on the white, blue and black canopy has a lot of inertia here, and it actually swings him through the lines of Kathy's canopy, which leads to probably the oddest downplane you're likely to see. Nicholas cuts away, leaving his canopy, leaving the lines of his canopy going through the lines of Kathy's main, and very unfortunately there is a line that goes round to Franz's ankle, and the tension in this is such that there's no way Franz is going to kick that off. He kicks off his shoe trying, but if this was a bigger screen you'd be able to see that Kathy has actually orientated herself upright in this mess, meaning that she can reach across to this line and cut it. And that frees Franz, and he lands under his own main with a slightly sore ankle and a missing shoe. And Kathy then cuts several more lines on her main to free this canopy. She doesn't want to just cut away without knowing that this canopy is completely clear of her and all her kit. So she cuts a few more lines on her main. This canopy then disappears. She can then very safely cut away and go into her own reserve. So 3 incidents of knife usage. So in answer to this idea, this question of do crew jumpers have big knives? Yes, we do. We need to have them, and you'll see us on the flight line with them, and you'll probably hear us talking about them and showing each other our knives. We do like to talk about them. But actually, knife usage is extremely rare, just like cutaways. These 3 examples I've shown you are the only 3 examples that I'm aware of in my jumping. I was having a bit of a conversation with Martin about this during the week, and he told me about 2 more examples, but they were 10 years ago, weren't they?
That's the only time I've used a knife in over 1,000 crew jumps.
Yeah, yeah. So putting it into perspective.
People I know haven't used one at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Not counting Ian.
We're leaving you out of it, Ian.
Yeah, but Ian jumped in the bad old days.
Yes, yes.
He was doing cool conicals.
Yeah, so it's pretty rare. So moving quickly on, some of the photographs that I've shown you are really useful in providing evidence that it's not true that crew jumpers don't like freefall. We like freefall, just little bits of freefall, please.
You've got a log in as well.
Absolutely. So another commonly heard statement, leaving that behind us, about CF, part of this reputation, is that lightnings, because generally lightnings are our kind of all-purpose canopy. So when people talk about CF canopies, they're generally meaning lightnings. And the reputation is that they are just a nightmare to land. But here's Emily. Thank you, Emily, skillfully smashing that myth. And in case you think it's a one-off, here she is again. And in case you think that's just Emily, here's Kel. And here's Wes. So as you can see, it's not entirely true that lightnings are a nightmare to land. Oh, and that was somebody using my GoPro and my lightning, but I don't know who it was. But I took that as license. I took that as license to use the footage. It was that event at Langer, and it was getting passed around. Yes. But it is also true that you need to fly the landing. That crew dogs can mess up landings just like anybody else.
I'm already on the ground on this one, so this is not me.
Oh, wrong one. Okay. So actually I've got other people demonstrating how not to land a lightning. We've got Ali, but that was really quick, yeah. Because hers wasn't too bad. But this is Jason. He does a proper job of showing us how you can mess it up. And Max. Max does it. Not once, but twice the same weekend. And I'm sure all 3 of these would agree that this was user error. It was not the lightnings. So, Yeah. I did hope to get some shots of you guys coming in formation and landing the storms, because it is very impressive. Yeah. And the last thing I want to very quickly talk about is the idea that CF is really hard to get into. And the reality is that you need to be jumping specialised kit to do CF jumping, really, safely. And there aren't that many coaches in the UK, not compared to other disciplines. There are myself, I'm pilot here, and the very smiley Simon Soper down at Headcorn, and Gavin at the bottom here, our BPA CF rep, jumps at Headcorn sometimes coaching, and also at Langer. We've got Jason Hobbs at Langer, and there's also coaches at Cark and at Dunks and Black Knights, as far as I'm aware. So there are coaches out there, but you might have to be a bit more proactive than with other disciplines. And the good news is that the coaches that there are out there do their very best to maintain extra kit for coaching. You know, it's fantastic what some of the sort of more old school coaches have done in terms of collecting kit so that people can go and try CF. And if you are interested in coaching, there's a Canopy Formation coaching group on Facebook where you can ask questions, or you can post to see, you know, let coaches know that you're interested in some coaching, and you can see what events are going on. And I'm realising now that I've probably completely dissuaded a lot of you from ever trying CF. But you can see how happy and smiley it is, really. Not like some of the stuff that I've shown you. Also, you could email Gavin.
All the stuff he shows basically advanced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coaching jump one-on-one, complete different story. You know, the coach's responsibility is to make sure you have a good experience.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know of any incidents from coach jumps.
Very
Yeah.
few in the last 25 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very few. The shot I showed of the two people with the very smiley Emily in it, that was a coaching jump. That was Emily's first CF jump with Jason Hobbs as a coach. And that's the kind of thing you get on your sort of introduction to CF. And what I've shown you with the cutaways, some of those are people who've got thousands of CF jumps and have not had a cutaway. Some of them are people who, you know, a lot of them are people who are on the world record, the 100 way, at the stuff that I showed you from the States. So these really are very experienced people are putting themselves in these jumps. So going back to this, you could email Gavin or email me. I do quite a bit of organising, and I'm a very willing coach. And if you've got CF1 and you're interested in doing more stuff, then yes, use the Canopy Formation coaching group, but you might also want to look at the European Canopy Formation group. They're really proactive at organising things all across Europe, and it is a fantastic group of people. And they actually seem to specialise in really safe crew, because their events, we just don't seem to have cutaways amongst crew, unless it was Franz with bagged canopy. So that just leaves me to say a big thank you, really, to all the people who have very generously taken the footage that I've shown you. They've been there, they've got this good quality footage, and they've given me permission to share it in a public forum. As I was saying at the beginning, a lot of this footage doesn't really get shown publicly because of the nature of it. So I really appreciate that generosity, and I hope that you've found the talk illuminating and entertaining, maybe as sort of giving you a bit of a different picture of crEUw. I think we've got a little bit of time. Okay, yeah, 5 minutes. For you to ask any questions about what I've shown you, or maybe there's something you've heard about crEUw, you'd like to hear from the crew dogs in the room, what they think of it. And you've got quite a wide range of crew dogs in the room. You've got super old school, mega experienced crew dogs with newer people, you've got competitors, you've got coaches. So fire away, ask us some questions.
On the gear side, do you need, like if you're going to do it, like start and get into it, do you need a full rig, or could you say just have a canopy and change it over?
You absolutely can have a canopy and just change it over. but you have to be a bit particular about the kind of container, and you might find, because of there's a different kind of bulk to a crEUw canopy, and you're free packing it, it might be that the size lightning or the size crEUw canopy you're jumping doesn't fit into your normal container. But that was exactly how I started off, swapping canopies around. Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
won't even fit the way that Molly's fitted them.
Yes.
I've been doing CF a year and I haven't actually bought any crEUw kit at all yet, and my freefall rig is too small for the size of canopy I use, and we do a lot of swapping and changing and stuff. So often I give my rig to someone who jumps a very small CF canopy, and then someone else, and literally like cycle the rigs around. At the end of the day, it's like, who's got my main? Who's got my container? And just like hunting for it at the end of an event.
Who's got my knives?
Yes,
One thing
Ian.
you missed out on the 2-knife rule,
Yeah.
which I put in. Right. The second knife is for when you're under your reserve with a line over on it. Right? 'Cause
Okay.
I've been there. And I've run out of knives.
I was going.
With their first knife.
Yeah, I was going to tell the story about being on the flight line and someone says, "Why have you got 2 knives?" And it's, well, I haven't worked out where to put number 3 and number 4. Yeah.
Little orange plastic ones. They are not a knife. Right?
Yeah.
The little orange plastic ones, when you come to use them, they work fine on the ground. They absolutely brilliant on the ground for going out. It's when you're in this, you've got this little orange thing out, and you go to cut it, the orange thing breaks.
Yeah.
You're there like that going, I wish I had another knife.
I'll show you actually, for anybody who doesn't know an aircrew knife, this is an aircrew knife. So in that kind of situation, this is going to be much more reliable and much more useful. And it is lanyarded, so you can't drop it. And yeah, I have metal hook knives. Yeah.
One of the other things about knives, yes, the book says you need to have 2 knives when you're doing CF. But remember, the book says you have to have a knife when you're doing a freefall jump. How many of you have ever used your knife
Yeah.
in any of your other jumping? So therefore, only because the book says you need to have a knife doesn't mean you're going to use it every time, because I've never used a knife in any of my jumping, either freefall or CF.
It's only the BPA.
Sorry?
It's only the BPA.
Yeah, it's a BPA thing that
Yeah.
requires you to have a knife. Yes.
But I would say that if you're freefall jumping, you're required to have a knife. And even when I was a freefall jumper before I ever did CF, I always carried a proper jackknife, because I always figured I wasn't sure when I might need it, but if I ever did, it would be a pretty desperate situation, and I wanted a knife I could rely on. And those, like Ian says, those little orange plastic ones, just thrown away. Spend £5 or £10 on a metal or a polycarbonate hook knife, and hopefully you'll never have to use it. But if you ever do, you can rely on it.
Yeah. So
I've been in the stack before, and people have said, has anyone got a knife? Luckily enough, I had one on a bit of string, and we managed to pass it down.
I told you crew dogs like to talk about knives.
I was going to say, buy in a beer later, and you'll hear a lot of the stories.
Yeah. But going
Also
back.
remember, there's lots of stories that Marshall tells. A lot of that is not allowed anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because he's done it, and they say we need a rule.
Actually,
And I wrote the rules so you can't do it.
it probably wasn't allowed then either, but you still did it.
But going back to the kit question, there is this sort of extraordinary camaraderie, I think, amongst crew jumpers. It's one of the things that really I just really liked about crew right from the outset. And there is this sort of swapping around of kit and this generosity to people to help them jump. Once somebody's got through their CF1, if they're coming to events, we want to help them get jumping. And also on the Canopy Formation Facebook group, people put out requests for, does anybody know of a 160 going, or does anybody know if where I can get an aircrew knife? So yeah, the kit is a really interesting one when it comes to crew. I think we've probably got time for one more question, but then you recognise the crew people now, so you can buy them a beer and ask them all sorts of questions. Yeah, so have we got one more question?
Are exits as scary as they sound?
No, not at all. No, it's...
Stories of canopies and faces.
That would be most likely to be where people are doing team stuff and they're exiting close to each other. And because for crew, what you need is a nice stable exit. And you're going to pitch within sort of 3 to 5 seconds. And when you do your first few jumps, you're going to get out into clean airspace. And it will be just you jumping, and then a coach will follow you out. So there's absolutely no risk of that. But then as people get more experienced and maybe get into competition, or some of the sort of more experienced, riskier stuff, I'm saying competition because people sometimes do timed exits where you're getting out. It's a bit like an equivalent of a linked exit in FS, where you're trying to get out as close together as possible and to synchronise your pitching so that your canopies are inflated and you can start working as quickly as possible. And if people get that wrong, I mean, there are incidents where people get canopies in faces. And am I right in saying that rules came in about the build time, the 30-second build time, because of the Russians really pushing that? Yeah. Yeah, where they were getting out and they were sort of ready to take that first dock before canopies were fully inflated, and that's very risky.
You only do that with people that you've done hundreds of jumps
Yeah,
with and
yeah.
things like that, there is no need to do it whatsoever anymore until they change the rules again.
Yeah.
No rule changes.
But I think that's a really good demonstration actually of that kind of reputation, because people will talk about some of these incidents and that's what people remember. Oh, crew, it's ridiculously scary exits. It's canopy in your face on exit. It's crashing lightnings into the ground. And in between those 2 points, you're just going to be wrapped in canopy and using big knives.
Do you get extra points for pitching your pilot chute back into the aircraft as you leave? Because I've seen that happen.
No.
So can I,
You'll get grounded.
the US competition rules actually state that you have to be clear of the aircraft before pitching your pilot chute, because there was a team that did that and nearly crashed an otter. So they brought in a rule, and
That rule's been there most of the time, but if you do an exit like that, with a free-packed canopy, you will get a very hard opening.
Yeah.
And there's no need to do it. You get out
Yeah,
the slip
there's
stream,
no
there's
advantage.
no need to open in 1 second. You can do it in 3.
Yeah.
It makes minuscule difference, but the openings are incredibly hard if you open it in the slipstream. I've seen people put the pilot chutes over the tailplane.
Yeah.
There's no need to do it.
Some of the events that I've shown you here, the boogies in the States and the European team stuff, they will actually stand you down from jumps if you're pitching, if you're anywhere near pitching into the aircraft. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think we need to finish there to make sure we get to the AGM bit. But thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.